By 750 BC, as the Greek world enters the Archaic period, the notions of the household unit, the oikos, had already emerged, as had the political unit of the polis, a term regularly translated as city-state. The Greek center of the universe, Delphi, was only growing more active. Delphi received ever grander gifts, and Apollo's word, through his oracle at Delphi, would come to factor in very significant decisions. During the Archaic, Delphi would come to host athletic and cultural competitions, the Pythian Games, one of the 4 Panhellenic Games, this one in honor of Apollo. The other 3 Panhellenic Games are the Nemean Games, the Isthmian Games, and the most well-known of them all, the Olympic Games, which were in honor of Zeus. A competitive mindset was an abiding perspective in the Greek conception of things, and Homeric notions of the heroic man were prominent in their minds. The 2 epics of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and Hesiod's writings, Theogony and Works and Days, were perhaps written down sometime around 725 BC. During the Archaic as well, Greek colonization picked up significantly. We've already encountered the Ionian migration. Now Greeks found colonies in many regions. By 580 BC, the Greeks had colonies through the eastern Mediterranean, the southern shore of the Black Sea, eastern Sicily, southern Italy, southern France, and the eastern coast of Spain. The most powerful state of the Archaic proved to be Sparta, which took a rather unique path for a Greek polis during this period. Unique to Sparta was its 2-king system, where the kings served as military leaders more than anything else. Beyond the 2 kings, Sparta's system included 5 ephors for administration, a council of 30, and an assembly of their adult male citizens. They fought 2 wars against Messenia, their neighbor to the west, the first from around 730 to 710 BC, and the second from around 640 to 630 BC. This second war left Messenia defeated and enslaved to the Spartans. The reality of this massive Helot population in part induced the great closing of Spartan society. Sparta, for much of the Archaic, is noticeably culturally rich. But by the classical, their conservative tendencies had made them into an unlively culture, culturally speaking. One manifestation of the cultural richness of Sparta during this period is their beautiful Laconian pottery. Another manifestation are the poets Tyrtaeus and Alcman, both of whom were likely born in the 7th century BC. But Spartan culture soon turned obsessively militaristic and conservative, as their state became very concerned about its subjugated Helot population. Sparta became a single-minded warrior culture. From a young age, Spartan boys were taken from their family and raised in age cohorts, training to be warriors. A woman ought to produce robust males who could keep Sparta's system of a minority enslaving a much larger majority intact. Women were to be fit, and indeed, Spartan women had exercise as part of their education. An extreme example of the attitude Sparta took to the Helots was the allowance for boys who, in their developmental training, were now going through a rough period of living off the land to kill any Helot they fancied upon without legal repercussion. They also banned the use of coinage. Though unique in a number of ways, some of which the varied Greek city-states were not sympathetic about, Sparta and its constitution stood as an example to the Greeks of good order. Another important polis during the Archaic is Corinth. Corinth was wealthy and economically advanced, and this only continued after Bacchiad oligarchic dominance was toppled by Cypselus the tyrant around 657 BC. Cypselus is followed by Periander. Periander is followed by Psamticus, who is overthrown, and a system of magistrates and a council followed. Now on to Athens, which would have to wait for the classical period to be the peak player. But interesting changes were underway during the Archaic. In 594 BC, Solon was elected archon. He introduced reforms called the shaking off of burdens to alleviate the civil conflict, or stasis, that was occurring. One such reform eliminated debt-bondage. Some of the more significant steps he took were introducing formally defined class distinctions based on wealth and having the laws of Athens published. The new class system formalized the nature of the hierarchy of society, and most importantly of the elite, in an unrelated to bloodline manner. From top to bottom, Pentacosio Medimnoi, Hippias, Zugatai, and Thetis. Solon himself is one of the 7 men of the Archaic period who are memorialized in the classical as the 7 sages, or the 7 wise men. To mention 3 others, there's Pittacus of Mytilene, born around 640 BC. There's the philosopher Thales of Miletus, who was born around 625 BC. And there's Chilon of Sparta. Despite Solon's reforms, stasis remained the mainstay of Athenian politics, and in 546 BC, Athens came under the rule of the tyrant Pisistratus. Pisistratus established magistrates for more rural areas, obviating the necessity for farmers to come into the city for the realization of justice. He expanded mining, ordered building projects, and mandated a perhaps 10% tax on agricultural production. Athens did rather well under his rule, growing in prestige and influence. Among his varied accomplishments, Pisistratus annexed Delos. Pisistratus died in 527 BC, and he may have been followed by a co-rulership of his sons Hipparchus and Hippias. Hipparchus is killed in 514 BC, and it's likely over the following years that Hippias ruled in a more stereotypically tyrannical way, ending in 510 when Hippias is compelled to leave Athens. After Hippias's forced departure from Athens, Isagoras and the demagogue Cleisthenes vied with one another. Isagoras hailed Spartan help, and the Athenian populace took none too kindly to this and drove the Spartans out. Cleisthenes would now play a major role, and he introduced many reforms. He divided the 4 existing tribes into new groupings, totaling 10 tribes, each drawn from regionally diverse bases. Each tribe would provide 50 counselors picked by lot to serve for 1 year in the Council of 500, which replaced the former 400-seat council. Any given individual could only serve 2 terms in their lifetime. By this time, a major power player who would serve as great antagonists in Greece's early classic period had already taken over a number of Greek city-states. Namely, after the Lydian king had conquered a number of Ionian Greek polis, Lydia had itself been conquered by the Persian Empire. We'll explore the post-500 BC period, which gets going with the Ionian Greeks with the aid of Athens and the Retria revolting against Persia, in the next video on the history of Greek civilization.